Hello, my name is John Rose, and today I'm going to take a closer look at genetics, especially how it relates to gray hair, especially how it relates to my gray hair, because I get comments on my gray hair all the time saying, John, if you're so healthy, why is your hair still gray? I thought your diet reverses gray, and it does, folks. It depends on what kind of situation you're in. And this is where genetics comes into play. So I'm going to take a look at genetics and how it relates to old age and gray hair, and how it relates to my gray hair, even how it relates to germs and not in old age. And germs, old age, and genetics, those are three legs, one of three legs that our so-called experts stand on to try to establish some credibility. Once again, there's three legs conventional medicine stands on to establish some credibility. One of them has to do with three bogus excuses they give for the cause of disease. And they have to come up with these three bogus excuses because they don't know the cause of disease. And they can't say, we don't know all the time, which is what they do in 90% and more of the cases, don't they? We don't know, but we know it's not your food, but we don't know the cause. And we can't say we don't know all the time, which is why we came up with these three bogus excuses, so we can say, it's the germs, it's the genes, it's the old age, and that's all poppycock. No, John, all old people get sick, don't you know any better? Yeah, that's what they tell us. That's not true either. It's not how long we lived, it's how we lived. Just like genetics in most cases. Genes mostly determine how disease symptoms manifest, not necessarily if they do. So we have genetic weaknesses and genetic defects. And with genetic defects, this is again how a symptom is going to manifest. So if you inherit these weak genes and someone else inherits these weak genes, then when we have a bad lifestyle and the garbage that has to accumulate, it's going to accumulate in those areas of weakness. It's a lot like how a chain breaks at its weakest link. So in most cases when they blame our diseases on a gene, it's usually a genetic weakness. And yes, as I mentioned, genetic weakness is only going to determine where a symptom manifests, not if. It's the lifestyle factors that will make that symptom manifest. But in other cases, we actually do have genetic defects. And that's what happened to me. There's a study published May 3rd, 2018, last year, about a year ago. It's a direct link between MITF, and that is innate immunity, and hair graying. That's the name of the study. I'll put a link down below to this study. And they came out and they figured out what causes premature aging. And in my case, the reason why my hair is gray has nothing to do with my lifestyle. It has to do with my constitution. When I was in my mother's womb, she was exposed to poisons, and that damaged my hair follicles. I started turning gray prematurely in my early 20s. Now, when I coach people who are bald and they're graying, they change their lifestyle, they grow their hair back, and it comes back to their natural color. So it depends on what type of genetic problem you have. Is it a weakness? Is it a defect? And when you think about genetic defects, I always think about the Pottenger cat study. I've talked about it many times in other videos. Dr. Francis Pottenger did a 10-year study with cats back in the 1930s. And what he did is he went through, in a 10-year period of time, 900 cats. He didn't start off with that many, that's just how many he went through. And he had two main groups, divide them up inside a house. They had outdoors and indoors, and just had a fence in between them. Fed them the same foods, but half the cats, he let them eat it the way they would eat it in nature. The other cats, he made them eat it the way we eat it, cooked it for them, and what happened? The cats that ate the cooked food developed all the same types of problems we have, all the illnesses, the ill behaviors, and even genetic defects. He even noticed he couldn't grow manure or use the manure from the cats that ate cooked food to grow things on. Think about that. Take this cat's manure that's eating raw food, we can grow stuff on it. Cats that ate the cooked food, you can't even grow anything on the manure, and that made me realize not too long ago that when waste matter outside our body caused a problem, it probably wouldn't have been such a problem if we weren't eating the wrong food and cooking it, which makes it worse, and that contributes to the germs, which I'll get to in a second. But for now, Dr. Fratch's pathogen proved that every generation of the cooked food cats had more and more birth defects. He would even measure the calcium in these cats' bones when they would die, and he'd let them die of their natural causes. And of course, he noticed that the cats that ate cooked food, their bones were elongating. They looked like they were getting bigger, but they were weaker bones. They had 17% calcium in the first generation, dropped down to 9% in the second, all the way down to 4% in the third. Genetic defects based on what our parents ate. That's going to determine one of the factors that determine how healthy you are. That's your genetics. But then there's the constitution. What was going on with your mother's diet and her lifestyle choices when you were in her womb? And then what happened when you were breastfed? This is also part of our constitution. So genetics is a big part of the equation, and so is our constitution. We can be damaged and then have symptoms because of that. Of course, the other piece of these three bogus excuses are the germs. The germ theory of disease. It's not your fault, folks. Blame it on old age, can't do anything about it. Blame it on genetics, can't do anything about it. Oh, those damn germs are ubiquitous, can't do anything about it. Even Louis Pasteur on his deathbed confessed, the microbe is nothing, the terrain is everything. Meaning that bacteria have a job on this planet, and their job is to gobble up bad stuff, garbage, waste matter. And they're the consequence of the disease, not the cause, although they come with their own side effects because they eat and they poop, so we have to deal with their poop. Depends on what they're eating. The worse they're eating, the worse their poop. Pretty simple. So those are the three bogus causes that are one of the three legs that conventional medicine, allopathic doctors stand on to try to establish some credibility. The one leg they stand on that does give them credibility, but only in one area, would be their expertise in emergencies. That's what allopathic medicine is good for. If you're in a car accident, there's an act of nature, that's what doctors are good for. They know how to control the body in case of emergencies. So they're good for things outside of our control, but some of the things they're good for is because of things we've done to ourselves, but it's progressed to a state where now we're about to die from it. Like heart disease, for example. So yeah, conventional medicine can be good in emergency situations. Either it's outside of control, something happened to us, or we've been doing it so long that we're at the very last stage of our disease and they're prolonging that condition a little bit longer. But the germ is not the problem, folks. Old age is not the problem, folks. Genetics, yes, it can be a huge factor. It's going to determine how you get sick and possibly guarantee you're going to be sick or you're going to have certain symptoms and or situations from that. And so those are two of the legs. We've got the fact that they are good in emergencies. That's one of the legs they stand on. Then they got those three bogus excuses they give because they can't say cause unknown all the time. The third leg conventional medicine stands on to try to establish some credibility has to do with the vaccine myth. It ties into the virus myth and the germ theory myth. These are all myths, folks. I did a great video a couple weeks ago or so called Myth Shattering Vaccine Graphs, where I showed you the graphs that came from that book, Dissolving Illusions, which I've seen these graphs in other books, where they look at about a 100-year period of time, mid-1800s to mid-1900s, where all these diseases that vaccines supposedly eradicated were on a steady decline, about 10% every decade, because we found out the problem. We figured it out. It was a sanitation problem. The Industrial Revolution came along, we moved into cities, we weren't dealing with our waste matter outside of us. That causes problems. And all those diseases associated with that filth was on a steady decline, and the vaccines came in. Magic, look, we're responsible for making this go away. So it's a scam to make us think they know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. Watch my video, Myth Shattering Vaccine Graphs. Look at these graphs and you can see what's going on. And I'll always like to tell the story about how this can also be reflected in what happened in the Roman Empire in the West and in the East 1,000 years apart. What happened is the conquerors came in, they destroyed the infrastructure, they destroyed the aqueducts and the sewage systems. And in both cases, the plague broke out. It's a disease of filth, my friends. So we have filth outside of us. It's worse because we're eating the wrong food. Remember the Pottery Cat study? couldn't grow food with the cat's manure that ate cooked food. In addition to these diseases of waste matter outside of us, we have the waste matter inside of us. So most of our diseases has to do with waste matter. Remember, we got 2 bathrooms. They back up. That causes disease. That's in our own body. That's internal waste matter. But we can have exogenous inside of us that will still be in there, and we'll be backing up also. So it still causes the same problem. There's something inside of us that doesn't belong there. And then we got that waste matter outside of us. So when we have a combination of waste matter inside of us and waste matter outside of us, then we have these other complicated conditions. This is why not everyone has problems with waste matter outside of them. It depends on how much waste matter they have inside of them also. So we have these diseases of affluence, where we're eating like kings and queens and putting a bunch of garbage in us. Then we have the diseases of poverty. And we see that nowadays, don't we? We have these so-called diseases that were eradicated by vaccines. We see these happening now in third world countries because they have poor sanitation. And this is all by design. This Bill Gates giving $10 billion to vaccinate the entire planet is all by design to kill us, to make us believe that there is some sort of magic injection we can take to cure a disease. And this is all a lie. The conventional medicine should not even exist the way it is now, because it's mainly set up to be a treatment peddling system for mostly lifestyle related problems. Once again, they're qualified to an extent to help us in emergencies, although many of their approaches are very invasive. I remember reading one time about Dr. Richard Schultz, where they somehow encountered someone that had a car accident and they busted up their knee real bad and the roads were real bad. They couldn't take him to the emergency room, and I think it was outside his house or something. They came up to him, or he heard the story somehow about this happening, and instead of trying to clean out the wound or anything, they just packed it with a bunch of cayenne pepper and wrapped up the leg with a bandage. The next morning they took off the bandage and you couldn't even tell there was an injury. It actually healed by natural means. So many times when we get in a car accident, we go to allopathic doctors, they're not using the best method, but you got to admit they've been doing it for so long, they really are lifesavers in certain situations. So the allopathic doctors, that's what I call part of the art of healing. There are a lot of protocols that are part of the art of healing, and that's when there's a certain amount of damage that has to be addressed. But what most of those protocols come up short with is they really don't understand the science of healing. And in order to understand the science of healing, you have to have knowledge of how to live. You got to have knowledge of how to eat. Most of these guys don't have that. They think they do, and they're unaware that they're screwing up the law of cause and effect, because cause and effect is always going to happen. Nothing we can do about it unless we go to a magician like a doctor, an allopathic doctor that gives us drugs that interfere with the communication process so the symptom doesn't manifest. But the problem doesn't go away. You still have that problem, and it's going to continue to keep creating more problems. So there are actually quite a few different remedies that can be part of the art when it comes for gray hair. I've got a pretty good sized file on hair. I've been accumulating now for several decades, and I've read a lot of different ways of people trying to turn their hair back gray. And I'm always reminded of the story with Arnold Ehret. He had Bright's disease, healed himself by turning to a fruit-based diet and fasting, and he was balding and gray. His hair came back, and it came back to natural color. Now, that's a simple way to do it. He believed, he had an interesting theory on this. He believed that all of our toxins and waste matter is going through the head and it's frying the hair follicles. That's why you got it. So clean out this garbage down here. You want to have the fumes going up there killing your hairs. Kind of funny. But anyway, maybe I should do another video and pull up my file and show you some of the various remedies. There's a lot of traditional Chinese approaches to this. Onion juice is one that was pretty popular a while back. A lot of people know that there can be a mineral deficiency. There could be a toxicity issue also involved here, as in the case of my mother. She was exposed to these toxins that damaged my hair follicles. But what I would do is, instead of going to the trouble of making onion juice and putting it on my hair and all that stuff, I'd just take a solid food vacation. Let's see what happens when we get clean inside. Let's see if we can't do what Arnold Ehret did to grow back our hair and to turn our hair back to its natural color. For the rest of us, we can do what Ann Wigmore did. Her hair finally came back, and she was, I think, in her 70s when it finally came back. She did it by drinking massive amounts of wheatgrass juice. I haven't done that either. I really haven't done anything specific to do anything about it. And now I'm glad I didn't, because I realized, thanks to that study that came out May 3rd, 2018, that my mother was exposed to toxins, damaged my hair follicles. So my gray hair has nothing to do with my lifestyle. It had to do with what happened to my mom when I was in her womb. Fortunately, I'm in the minority here. Most of you guys can do something about this. And when you do it, you know what happens. You're in for a treat.